Welcome everyone. This is the second in the EDC's series on developing a makerspace in San Juan County. As I mentioned, we're recording these so that we can put them up online so that people who can't be here attending can see what's going on in the county. The EDC is working to try to encourage development of a makerspace system that would work across our geographically separated community of some form. So we're inviting people who are already working on developing that to come and talk with us. And this week, we want to thank Marcy and Stephen for coming in to talk about what they've been doing with the San Juan's Makers Guild. And with that, I will transfer to you. Thank you.
Hi, I want to thank everyone for showing up, and I'm imagining there's quite a diversity of types of makers in the room today. So we wanted to provide you with a little bit of an overview on the background of how this Makers Guild even began to form, and then talk about where we'd like to be able to see it go as a community-based organization. And then somewhere in there, we need to share news about the small USDA grant that's going to help us do our first research project. So, Stephen, do you want to start with maybe the history?
Well, for a dozen years or more, we've been observing and learning about and tasting, I guess, the makers movement, which is international at this point. And we've long observed that there was an abundance of creativity flowing through the DNA of this place, and a variety that you know, is, I think, unmatched anywhere. And it's amazing. And so as we planned our return from our foreign service, as we like to think of it, in Hawaii for a dozen years, we were looking for gaps in the, I guess, the social economic infrastructure in the county, and wondering if we might be of some assistance in response to what we perceived. And so last year, in response to those years of observing and listening and asking and speculating, Marcy, in her work of scanning the universe of federal funding, observed a small pot of USDA money that she'd never noticed before. And she notices lots of small pots of USDA money. That's kind of where her attention floats. And so we already had in mind this project to canvass the county and find out who the makers are and what they're up to, and what they need, and what they want to learn, and what they'd like to teach, and just kind of map the resources. And so we are beginning that now with the help of funding from this resource. And I'll let Marcy talk a little bit more about that, unless you want to say more about the history.
Well, I think the process of even the concept of the guild being seeded came from talking to different makers and realizing what a diversity of makers there are. There's a whole food industry of makers, the whole agricultural products that are not food, all of the artists and the artisans. And then we started realizing there's all the designers and landscape and furniture and architecture and fashion. And there's a whole body care group, yeah? And then with Mickey's help, we started learning more about the technology side of things. There's some people working on different types of lenses that allow telescopes in outer space to do remarkable stuff that we don't all hear about here on the island. I think a lot of the makers here are better known other places than they are locally. So the idea with the Makers Guild is to help each other self-identify as being part of this movement that is essentially an economic development impetus, but it's tapping people's creative capacities to find a way to live in the islands and develop an economy here. So we have, necessity is the mother of invention out here on the islands. We are needing to do this for our economy. But the idea that we all retreat to our individual studios and we don't have much contact with each other or our workshops, seems like maybe we could benefit from learning who each other are, what we're all doing, ways that we might be able to help each other. So the first year now of the Makers Guild effort is to listen. Who's doing what resources do they already use? And that includes not just their materials, but do they have a makerspace? Do they have a private studio? Are they using a commercial kitchen? So to get a kind of a mapped out feel for what's here, what's now, and then what are our goals for the next 5 or 10 years as individual makers? What are our business goals? And then what are we interested in doing as a community? How can we help each other look at broader markets and not necessarily be dependent on tourism dollars coming into the islands, learning how to create products that can go out in the regional, national, and possibly international marketplaces. And there's a couple of people on the call here who are part of a group that we're listening in and trying to be supportive of, which is develop kelp farming. So we're also looking for some new industries that could be sprouted at this time. Things that would be a unique product that could be developed here and couldn't be developed, in the middle of Eastern Washington, for example, because of geography, we have a certain limitation on the scale of production in some types of products. But then we also have advantages, both human advantages, as well as some aspects of our natural environment. So we are really trying to look at the full spectrum. And each time we meet makers, they say, oh, well, I know about so-and-so and so-and-so, and it hasn't been recorded. So what we're hoping to do today is listen to what some of the pieces of information that you all would be interested in sharing and in learning, so that when we put together a survey, which we're going to be working with Northwest Agricultural Business Center out of Mount Vernon, and they do a lot of work here in the islands also, as they help us put together a survey to ask folks. We want to ask questions that are relevant to individual needs, as well as the overall community needs. And then we also want to be inclusive of existing maker organizations. There's already an artist guild on Lopez, for example, and there are the artist tours. And we'd like to learn, is there a network of people working in technology or light manufacturing? So we are completely sitting here with a blank canvas today and hoping that we'll get some valuable input. And then we plan to follow up with another one of these sessions, probably late January, early February, when we do have the actual survey online, so that you guys can help us with the first run through of putting in your information and giving us feedback before we launch something, countywide. And we're just so thankful every time we meet a maker who is working from a place of deep inspiration and incredible creativity. It's so inspiring. And I think we could all benefit from learning about one another that way, even if it's a completely different industry, but just realizing that people really are trying to follow their dream in the makers movement. What's that deep well that we tap into to not go sit in a cubicle and work for somebody else's corporation, but what are we doing to actually kind of define our own life and do something meaningful? So I appreciate all of the makers, and I sit on the board of the Ag Guild, so I'm learning a little bit more on the food side now of people that are doing the value-added food products. But this is just a huge, exciting field to be working in, and I'm just really thankful we're going to have the opportunity to get to know people. And then as far as the grant funding from the USDA goes, it's RBDG Rural Business Development Grant. And what we propose to do first is the asset mapping, which is what's here now, resources, human and otherwise, and then what are the needs for the future? So then there's a needs assessment that gets kind of built into that. And then when we get that information gathered together, we hand it off to the people who help us do the market studies. So we'll try and look for maybe 6 different industries that really could benefit from having support from experts in our region who kind of help us look at connecting the San Juans as an economic center to other locations to help us find ways to build the economy. And the last piece I just wanted to mention that's part of the grant is, as we go through this project, there will be at least 6, maybe up to 12, either individual makers or makers who have operating small businesses who can then use some of the grant resources to bring in experts to help them develop their own business plan, planning, for the future for new products or different ways to work with their employees. So we do have some flexibility in these funds, which is great, to kind of wait and see what unfolds and how can we best use some of the funds. So that's an overview on the funding side, and just want to encourage you all today to have time with us in a Q&A and or if you go in a breakout session to introduce yourselves to each other and learn about what you're doing, but also help us learn how a Makers Guild in concept could help you, and any real sort of brass tack items that you would like us to move to the forefront for what the Guild's goals would be in the next year. And then I think in closing, I'll just say that the Guild is currently a nonprofit in the state of Washington. It is under the umbrella of a nonprofit that I've been operating for some years now on the federal level. Our hope is that it's going to move off and stand by itself as its own organization with its own leadership and its own board. And at that time, the decision would be made whether it is a 501c3 or is it a type of trade organization or does it become a co-op? So we don't have answers to these questions because this is a community project. So the more input we can get, the better. And with that, I will zip. Thank you.
Did you want me to put up your website now or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's going to pull up the front end of this website that's under construction, where we are trying to really figure out how to hold a big enough umbrella for everybody to feel included, whatever type of projects they're working on. And we have it set up internally as you roam around inside it to look at the different sort of creative industry groups and different ways that people can share their information about their work themselves, their products, trying to use this as a directory essentially. And then the future holds the ability for our makers to become teachers, to attract students as an alternative revenue source, and also to invite expert makers from other places to come here to the islands to host programs that our local makers as well as guests could benefit from. So you'll see all of that being sketched out in this web platform, essentially, that we hope to grow to be much more than just a directory.
And part of the grant funding allows us to include people in the directory without any fee. So anyone who would like to be included can do so at no cost at this time.
Just want to double check. Are you guys able to see the Makers Guild website here? And
I see it on my screen. Are you able to scroll down?
yeah.
Yes, I can see it.
Where did you want me to scroll to?
Just, down through it so they get a feel for it. Yeah. So this is a visual representation of information that we're collecting now before we get to the actual survey phase. So if anyone who's on the call would like to have themselves and their product featured at this time, you can email us that, and I guess I will speak the email address, SJMG, San Juan Makers Guild, is the abbreviation, and then at sanjuanmakersguild.com, and that will come to us. And we are going to be through the winter building this out so that by the time the survey is ready to be launched, there's a lot of really rich and interesting information in the web directory for people to get a feel for where we're heading.
Oops, sorry, I forgot to mute myself.
Yeah, I see new people are joining. So maybe this is a good time to start the Q&A.
There. It sure sounds like a good plan. Everybody should be able to unmute themselves if they desire, and just remember to mute yourself again between and ask questions as you'd like.
Well, if questions haven't popped up, maybe some quick introductions so we kind of get a feeling for who's in the room. We were going to wait till the breakout for that, but maybe that'll help stimulate some thoughts of things you'd like to ask about Makers Guild services to your particular interests.
So everybody appears to be muted.
I could start.
Us.
I could start.
Yes, please.
Hi, Cindy.
Hi, how are you? Good to see you again. Hopefully we'll get the seaweed thing started up again. I'm Cindy Wolf. I'm newly elected to the county council here on in San Juan County. I live on Orcas Island, and I'm part of a group that is exploring the idea of doing micro seaweed farms all over the county in hopes of spurring a cooperative industry. So that's what I'm here for. And also to hear what everybody else is doing so I can support you in it.
Hi, if I may, my name's Giuseppe Spadafora. I'm a couple cool things going on here on San Juan are, well, one is I'm a board member at Alchemy Art Center. Alchemy Art Center, as some of you probably know, is a cooperative artist space with artist studios. Primarily right now it's ceramics and print making and photography. There's lots of classes. I'm sure some of you guys have probably even been to some of them. So that's a really awesome opportunity for makers here on the island to have access. There's like monthly memberships for studio space. And then the other thing that's happening, which I am also peripherally involved in, is the fellow shop, which we've been chatting here a little bit on this meeting about on the sidebar there. But fellow shop is also a monthly membership cooperative for, right now it's primarily woodworking, some blacksmithing. There's a couple lifts for putting vehicles up in the air, and potential for lots of other future things depending on who's involved and etc. It's kind of a tiered system where depending on what you can afford monthly, you get different benefits. And that's pretty fresh. We've been setting it up for the last couple of months. There's 3 or 4 members. I hope you guys can still see me. My internet connection is not very good. So those are both things that are happening here on the island. Excellent place to start on San Juan, at least for folks who are interested in having access to spaces that they might not otherwise have access to.
Great. Is anybody else part of any type of makers co-op that's already happening? Okay, I can mention one that we were taken to. that's out in Deer Harbor. And it has a couple of different industrial types of people working there. There's welding going on. There is, forgetting the name of it, the big digital cutter. Somebody else is doing tensile structures for special events. There's a variety of things going on in that space. It's a barn, essentially. And my understanding is when people have big projects, everybody from the group comes together and learns and helps that person complete that project. But mostly people are working on their own things, but there is some collaborative work going on there too. Anything on Lopez as far as makerspace? Anybody here from Lopez? Okay, the previous meeting we had was a lot about 3D technology and setting up a lab and using at Lopez, there was strong interest, and using recycled materials, so pulling it out of the waste stream to be able to turn into other products. So that's a Lopez hint there. We might learn how to do on other islands as well.
I can introduce myself. My name is Robert Demarest, and I'm on Orcas Island, retired here, involved in the library and the Friends of the Library. I've got 20 years experience teaching tech subjects like AP Computer Science, robotics, iOS app development, 3D printing, 3D design, 2D studio art, large format printing, working with microprocessors like Arduino. I spent 15 years as a library director. And when I moved here, I wanted to get involved with the library. I was disappointed that there wasn't a library of tools for lending. There wasn't that sort of, there was no makerspace here. So I'm clearly interested involved on Orcas, and I can see a relationship with, say, the exchange on Orcas as a way of creating a tool library that could eventually be available for checkout at a library and things like that. But, you know, I'm very interested in 3D design, 3D printing. I'd love access to a plasma table because I'm into G-code and all the sorts of things that one can do with that in 2 or 3 dimensions. And, you know, I'm glad to help out as I can.
So I wanted to mention that Nikita Palmasani on Lopez wasn't able to be here today, but she mentioned that there had been some interest in and efforts towards a tool sharing library on Lopez in the last few years. And I think we haven't mentioned that last time we had one of these talks, Todd Nicholson had mentioned that the port on San Juan Island was also planning on opening up a makerspace. So as well as part of their new Marine Technical Center. I also wanted to mention that in a couple of minutes, I'm going to open up breakout rooms so that people can chat in smaller groups and people can meet each other a little bit more easily. So I was going to break them up into the different geographies so people can meet their neighbors at this meeting, and next time maybe break it up by what kinds of technology people are interested in. But I just want to, I'm going to let people choose their own room, but that may only work if you've got the newest versions of Zoom. So if it doesn't work, I'm going to send out a form in a couple of minutes that you can tell me which room you want to go in. And then Marcy and Stephen said they'll keep on going with Q&A here. So sorry to interrupt with the flow there. I just wanted to put that out so people knew what we were planning on doing next. Thank you.
Sure. And then Kat Steele, you're involved with Orcasong, and I was just over there and learned that you also are providing space for North Beach Mushrooms to do their production, which I thought was pretty exciting to have, you know, multiple things happening over there. Do you want to introduce what Orcasong is up to?
Sure. Thanks. Yes, I'm Kat Steele. I'm the new director of the Orcasong Institute, which is the nonprofit educational component of the Orcasong Farm. So one of the things that we're very interested in, it sounds similar to what you all are doing, is creating a resilience hub at the farm and virtually as a place where some of the things you're talking that the Guild will provide, we would like to provide a sort of a clearinghouse and a directory of all the resources one needs to create community resilience. And so one of the things I'm interested in what you said, Robert, about the tool lending library. That's something that we're interested in supporting happening, and perhaps partnering with the exchange to do like a repair cafe. So a lot of my background personally has come through the transition movement. And I know that there's an active Transition Lopez and Transition San Juan Island. And I'm on Orcas now. We don't really have that established here. So part of what the Institute wants to do is establish a transition-like leadership training and a resilience hub. And yes, as you mentioned, the farm has been acting like an incubator for several local businesses, the Kingfish restaurant and the Clever Cow ice cream place, and the North Beach Mushrooms is actually, you know, on site at Orcasong Farm. And so we have, the Institute has plans for this innovation fund, and we're partnering with the EDC for a Thrives Fund. So we're, you know, actively looking for, we can call them makers, and we call them, you know, business entrepreneurs who need support, financial support and mentorship support, as long as their values of what the business is doing aligns with the values of the Institute, which are around eco and social responsibility and sustainability. So those are some of the things that we're planning, and it's exciting to meet you all and to know that it's like a collective dream. There's networking and people coming together as community to get to the next level of community resilience and creativity and economic self-sufficiency as much as possible.
Great, thank you. So,
Liz, go ahead.
Thank you, Stephen. I am so excited about your model. This decentralized idea about makerspaces is revolutionary. I was on the board of the EDC when we hired Victoria Compton about 10 years ago, and I served on that board for 6 years. I also coordinated the Scenic Byway through the San Juans and worked on a green business directory with the Orcas Library in the past. I currently live on Vashon Island, where I coordinate our Fix-It cafes, and I serve as a volunteer coordinator for our tool library. So I'm very happy to either consult with anyone who's interested in doing either of those two, or getting some of my compadres to come and participate with you. Marcy, I would love to see your proposal for your that you took to USDA, because I think it might be a model that we could use here on Vashon. And there was one last thing. Oh, the other thing I want to say is that there was just a statewide conference sponsored by Zero Waste Vashon on the repair economy. And they have started a website called repaireconomywad.org, I believe. I'll have to look it up. That's trying to highlight different Fix-It Cafe events, tool libraries, and maker spaces. So it might be interesting. I had talked to them about you, and they said, oh, the San Juans, they're only into arts and culture. But it's obviously that you're much wider and deeper than that. And I'm very excited to see what you all are doing. Thank you.
Yeah,
Well, thank you for that reflection. Given where you come from, I think I'd like to talk with you more.
Yeah, let's talk. Let's talk
about what you know and what your experience is.
Let's talk.
I want to interject. I'm about to open up the breakout rooms, but I also wanted to mention something that among the group that we started talking with at the beginning of the summer, one thing that came up was a need for, or there were a lot of individuals who had things they wanted to share, like their own individual space. And one of the things people weren't sure about is the liability issues, and how do you make that available while still keeping yourself safe. And so if people know about things like that and can share them, let us know so that we can pass that information along. And without further ado, I'll mute myself and open these breakout rooms and hope it works. If, like I said, you can stay in the main room and talk to Marcy and Stephen some more.
Looks like Caitlin has her hand up.
Yeah, before we part, can we hear from Caitlin?
Sure. Go ahead, Caitlin.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, my video is not working today, but I just wanted to say really quick, my name is Caitlin Leck, and I'm the coordinator for the food system team. So we're a relatively new group that is doing a community food assessment, looking at the current state of our food system here in the county. And then we will create a series of sector snapshots. So looking at land, water, farming, fishing, and so on, all the way through waste. And then that will kind of give us a picture of what the current situation is. And then we're going to switch gears to strategic planning to create a food system plan at a county scale. So I just wanted to put that out there. And also, yeah, there's just a lot of overlap with Marcy and Stephen's efforts. So I'm really curious to see like how this will all notch together. And my son is chiming in the background. Nice to see you all in the room.
Caitlin, before you leave completely, the equipment that we saw out in Deer Harbor, was that a plasma cutter?
Yes, yeah, thank you. That was the other thing I was going to say. My husband, hold on. My husband, Zachariah, is involved in that shared space, and it's a CNC plasma cutter. And so for him, his entire life, he's been doing this ancient craft of blacksmithing. And it's this fascinating way to join like the most modern technology in a way that allows him to save time and money and resources. Like you can use materials incredibly efficiently. So it's like marrying this ancient craft with this highly modern technology, and it's still, all those components go on to be hand forged. And so it's just super fascinating to see. And yeah, the Betchers own that property out in Deer Harbor. Chris Betcher is a partner in that CNC cutter.
So I've opened up the breakout rooms in case people want to go there. Like I said, you can sort of pop back and forth, I think, at least if you have the newer version of Zoom. If you can't, then I'll be popping in and out so that people can let me know if they want to move around. So, and if you don't see the ability to choose a room, then that form that I put up, you can use that to let me know.
I think that's 19. Well, for those of us who are staying in the main Q&A room, I would like to ask people to respond to any imaginings that they've been having about ways to cut down costs of production. And this is the co-op sort of thinking in this, is that if we can identify people that are using similar materials and find ways to do group buying, you know, it could be inputs for a farmer, could be steel for a welder. This is something where we think that the economic piece could be helpful, not just the marketing piece for the finished product, but how do we back up the supply chain and really look at ways to either reuse products that are already here on the island and or group buy so that what does come over can come over at a lower cost and provide support that way, rethinking sort of supply chain issues. And, you know, on the Ag Guild, this is huge, you know, the amount of food that's imported compared to local. But I think this is true across all industries. So if anybody has any thoughts about materials and ways that the Guild could be supportive in cutting down costs on materials would be great, or tools. So please speak up if there's anything that comes to mind.
I can real quick speak a little bit about materials. I primarily, one of the main things I do is I salvage things, take apart buildings, salvage that stuff. We have on San Juan, obviously, the great resource of community treasures for, you know, obviously depending on what you're doing. But in terms of materials, you know, because everything is obviously imported to this island and then we export a lot of trash, the more that we can, keep that stuff on the island, like you were mentioning, the better. And part of that, I think, is also figuring out how and where to store that stuff. You know, community treasurers can only process so much stuff, and they don't do a lot of the kinds of materials that I use, or a lot of the people I know use for fixing and building things and creating things. And just my personal thought is having a space where maybe a centralized space where people can share excess materials, can bring salvage materials, etc. Or, you know, if there was bulk orders of materials, they can be kind of centrally located for people to take them off from there.
So do the other islands have anything like the exchange where there is at least sort of a hub for materials to come to that then get reused? Or is this only on Orcas?
Lopez has the take it or leave it at the dump, which is basically a free store. And San Juan has Community Treasures, which is a nonprofit that is a combination. It's very similar to the exchange, but there's a lot of stuff that they won't take or process.
Okay. So it's the name of a place, not just a concept. Okay. Well, there was some talk I saw in the newsletter on Orcas also about melting down glass and then creating other products and finding ways to reuse concrete. Is there any progress on that kind of, you know, the building material side of things that anybody knows about?
I was thrilled to see that they were attempting to do that. As I understand it, I don't know that they're going to be remelting it so much as using it as a sand substitute. I mean, it replaces sand when it's ground to a certain consistency. And I understand you're going to use it as an aggregate, but you know, it could easily be remelted too.
Okay.
I think I'm unmuted.
Now
this
I
is
see
Carrie
Paula
Coffey.
West. I'm not seeing your screen. Are you the phone number, the 317?
Yeah, I'm out on
okay,
my
go ahead, please.
Yeah, just on the glass idea, I'm curious about this ability to have a commercial washing, sanitizing, and reuse of glass for the wineries, cideries, small makers. It's a high cost to get the glass and a high cost to send it back, and it's not well recycled, but we certainly could reuse.
And Carrie, where are you located?
San Juan Island.
San Juan, okay, thanks. And it looks like Caitlin raised her hand, but I'm not sure that I have any control over that. Can you just unmute yourself? I think you'll just speak.
Yes. Yeah, this is kind of like a, not directly in relation to your question, but related. You mentioned the possibility of forming co-ops, and I've just been recently learning a lot about worker-owned co-ops and the connection to local government and how local government can support the formation of worker-owned co-ops. And so it just seems like that will be a really key piece of the puzzle in terms of teaming up in an effective way and then being able to make those decisions. Like, you know, my background is in food and farming. And so, yeah, for farmers to have a co-op together to make those choices and like drill down on those details. It seems like, yeah, it's just a really good vehicle to effective decision making.
Well, my original agenda for the Makers Guild was that it would become a co-op, that it would find those common challenges and opportunities and help members find one another and help bridge those gaps, or in some cases go out and find some dough to help nurture the process. So that's kind of my personal agenda, but I have no ownership in this. This is currently organized as a nonprofit, and I'm 71 years old. I have no desire to run this thing.
We're just trying to launch and then get the community behind it to let it become what it wants to. And there is a farmers co-op. I don't know if anybody in this group is participating. I think some of you are from the names I can see. San Juan Islands Food Hub is now moving product to all of the islands. And some of it is value-added products. Some are floral design products. There's meat, there's fruit, there's vegetables. There's different baked goods that are moving. Some things are frozen, some are fresh. And it really is an exciting opportunity to see how these islands can learn to see themselves more holistically as one whole organism and be contributing to that. So we had a meal once that was great fun. We had strawberries from one island. We had vegan ginger scones from another island. It was just really nice in a meal to realize that we can support farmers and growers and makers all across the islands. And, you know, we are all very island homebodies, right? We like our island, but keeping that bigger scope view of the San Juans as a whole economic sort of a web that we can all participate in, I think is really one of these added benefits to the Guild, is seeing ourselves as larger than ourselves. And that's always a good thing. Now, I've seen some people come and go in the room just a few minutes ago. One is a ceramics person who contributed a really nice piece to the Ag Guild's auction. And do we have any other artists or artisans in the room right now? I think Peter would probably raise his hand for that. You want to tell us a little about what you're working on, Peter? Can you unmute yourself?
Yes.
Great, hi.
Victory. What I'm working on, I have a small farm on Dolphin Bay Road. I'm also a painter and I make toys. And I've been going in and out of making my living as an artist for about 20 years. What I'm working on now is studio work. Honestly, my practice is very much a solo sort of thing. I'm tuned in here to just learn. And as far as what I'm working on now, I've got a whole series of post-COVID paintings, 8 of which were on display at Washington Federal in July. And there's more to that series now. So that's basically what I'm working on.
Right. Well, we did go on and we did look at them, and we really appreciated the sort of mythological quality of some of the images, but also the contemporary political piece that you got all together in those paintings. And maybe you didn't see that at first look, but you know, the second look, the third look, it really started to speak, that work. So I'm glad you're, you know, making contemporary art contemporary and meaningful that way.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Yeah. So Sam, I think I have seen you speak before when we were doing the different types of makerspace lab discussion. Do you want to maybe explain to this group a little bit about your interest?
Sure. So my name is Sam Garson. I am the science teacher and STEM engineering teacher at the high school. For all intents and purposes, I'm running the STEM Center right now here in Friday Harbor, which we've actually taken this opportunity to really revamp the space. We're fortunate we now have kind of a full print farm. We were making face shields and ear clips for the community pretty much since last April with Luxel's printers as well. And we've been trying to kind of expand that opportunity. So we're in talks with a couple groups about trying to make this a community resource in the afternoons in the near future. I have laser cutters, CNC routers, milling, full wood shop, some automotive tools. We actually have a lot of robotics clubs here. We actually just got a grant, so I'm going to be sending home some microprocessors, actually Arduinos, to every single student to play with at home, so we can still get some of that hands-on education going. And a lot of the work that we've been looking at is how do we increase the usefulness of the building, because right now in the afternoons, with the exception of our underwater robotics team and some of that stuff, it's pretty much available. So Mickey and I have talked a little bit. And I've been trying to figure out ways to kind of get more community involvement. I'm hoping that right around after Thanksgiving, we'll actually have a public facing website where people can request 3D printing resources and they can send me designs. Our 6 3D printers were community fundraise purchase. So I'm happy to actually turn that back around, and anyone that wants to 3D print anything, they absolutely can. And we've got them pretty well working. We were able to actually just print the other day. I've got 60 lettuce knives for the culinary students to practice knife skills with at home. And they're just plastic. With our 6 printers, it took about a day, day and a half to print 60 knives to send home to students, rather than trying to actually have them handle real knives and someone chop off a finger. We figured this is a pretty good alternative. So we're trying to really ramp up what we can offer the community. We have our full automotive space. We have an electric vehicle that is nearing completion, and trying to look at some opportunities there as well with, you know, electric vehicle servicing. Ryan Palmatier and I have been talking a lot about that, because we do think there's a lot of potential for community outreach and community leveraging of this resource.
Well, I appreciate that you are thinking about the youth and the future of the youth and how they can have employment on the islands. And this is a problem nationwide and probably worldwide in rural communities, how youth are migrating out to the cities. And, you know, every now and then you hear about someone who returns when they're 35 and they bring a business idea. But, you know, what about keeping them here? So I'm glad to hear about what you're doing.
I wanted to mention that Sam is going to be our next speaker in December. I think Sam, was it December 11th? I don't have it right.
I think so. I don't actually have it.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for that.
And I'm hoping by that point we have that remote 3D printing website up, and there's a couple other conversations that are ongoing that I'm hoping might yield some actual results by then, so that that can kind of be a launch for people who want to take advantage of that resource. Or even, you know, one of the things I'm hoping is everyone that's doing Griffin Bay or homeschooling stuff can actually leverage that as well for getting some of these hands-on activities done at home. Because I mean, there's marble mazes, there's hundreds of really good resources, or even, you know, rapid prototyping for business ideas, things like that. We can print in multiple different materials with the printers we got, everything from just regular PLA plastic to PVC to carbon fiber, actually.
Yes, I noticed. So I think Julia also was giving us a wave. Julia, did you have something to share?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Well, we recognize Julia as someone who's very interested in the kelp farming. So maybe one of these meetings another time we'll have some progress on the kelp farming to share sometime.
We hope so. We're trying hard, all of us.
Right. David with the Home Trust. I'm not sure what, oh, Beth, I see your hand up. Beth, did you want to launch as you're unmuted? Huh, we can't hear you, but you don't have the mute sign on either.
Can you hear me?
Yes, that's working now. Yes.
Hey, Beth, this is
Audio
Steve.
problems.
I'm glad I've never made that mistake.
Too much headgear. Please go ahead.
Did that change anything?
It's good now. Yeah.
It did. You can hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. The library, the San Juan Library is currently in negotiation to buy a bigger lot in town, and on a 2.5 acre parcel. We would have room to do more than we're doing now, and just want to let people know to be involved in the process that will be forthcoming if that deal closes in December. We haven't bought it yet. It's still in negotiation, but it's very exciting, and we expect that to be happening, and there to be more good news. But, you know, that'll be years out. But in the meantime, the community process for developing what kind of space, maker space, the community wants to see will be there. And in the meantime, we also do have a tiny library of tools, primarily for dealing with accessibility tools, magnifiers, readers, hearing aid, things that make your TV audible to people with, you put the sound from the TV into your ears as opposed to turning the volume up to blast your house out. So we do already have a tiny library of things, but primarily about accessibility.
And that's a really relevant.
Now I can't hear you.
Well, that's a very relevant industry given the aging population in the islands to be thinking about these types of accessibilities, you know, products. I'm glad you brought that up.
Right. Here's a,
yes. And David, could you give us a little information on what you're working
on? Well, the Home Trust is a nonprofit housing developer, and I think of us as sort of a developer of human infrastructure. And our clients, they're homeowners. They buy homes we develop using USDA mortgages. And they're really, you know, working people on the island who have been shut out of the home buying market due to high prices. And it can include artists. A number of our current homeowners are artisans, like jewelry makers, painters, other types of artisans. The Home Trust is not, you know, we're not an arts group or you know, we don't have an assembly line type of operation. You know, we contract with builders, contractors to build homes. So this is probably not, it does, our operations probably don't overlap with what you're talking about in a very large way. Although I did have an idea for a complex oriented towards artists that would have living space as well as studio space, but that's some time off in the future.
Well, we have a background ourselves in affordable housing and have been researching the live work opportunities in rural settings and ways to try and flex the ag zoning a little bit so that the makers in the community have a way to live work. And I'm wondering, are you doing self-help housing or the 502 loans? Which program do your people use?
No, we use 502.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, well, good to know about what you're doing. And we certainly serve a similar population, that's for sure.
Sure. And thanks for holding this session. It sounds like very interesting type of organizing.
Well, there's a lot of cross-pollination that goes on every time you talk to people about what their creative passions are. I think that's what's going to happen with the Guild, is the people that in fields we've never even imagined are going to step forwards and say, well, maybe I should be part of this. Maybe there's a benefit for me. And that's one of the other pieces is, you know, what are the benefits that, you know, that we need to look at? What are the benefits over the next year that we can actually imagine that the Guild could truly provide? And, you know, it's easy to say to a business person who's already well established that they need help with marketing. You know, they just need a bigger marketplace. You know, what are the international opportunities, et cetera. But the USDA funds also want us to focus on people who, what they call are emerging entrepreneurs, people who are trying to figure out how to get set up. How do you, you know, even visualize what your business plan is and go through that process. So we're hoping that the Guild is able to host, and now probably exclusively virtual for the next year, different types of workshops that people could come online and take to kind of help assess what their capacities are, what their opportunities are, and try and help them focus their attention to have potentially the best results.
How are we doing for time, Mickey?
We can't hear you.
We can't hear you, Mickey.
Sorry, people can stay as long as they want or leave whenever they want, as long as people are finding it productive, I'll stick around. Somebody in one of the breakout rooms mentioned something that I realized would be good to share it with everybody here, and probably should have shared earlier. which is that in addition to these meetings, we've been hosting a group on the Slack platform, which if you don't know about it, it's just basically a glorified messaging system for groups for people. And part of that, it was built off what we've called our knowledge worker network. That was for people working with information resources, because a lot of those people are interested in things like designing electronics or building or inventing things or 3D printing. When we started talking about doing Fab Lab and Makerspace stuff, that's where I put our discussion group. So if you're interested in that, let me know. And happy to have more people take a look at that, so people can sort of continue discussions among a larger group offline. It's just email me and I can send you an invitation to the Slack group.
I wanted to add a few things, if possible.
Please.
Oh, I just wanted to address the idea of cooperatives and offer the resource. I've been working closely with a group called the Lift Economy. They're out of the San Francisco Bay Area, and their sort of specialty is helping communities develop cooperatives and cooperative cooperatives. So like, I think that was something you mentioned, Marcy, of a group of many cooperatives that are all cooperating together. And they're really helping look at what the legal structures are and the governance structures and how that activity can create what they're calling is the next economy. And that's something that that I've been working with them, looking at how the Institute can help forward that along. And I also wanted to mention with Dave Grow, I think he just left, I think it was Grow, that the Institute is seriously investigating how to create affordable housing on the farm land. And we're looking at different structures for that, if it should be a cooperative investment group or if it's a capital campaign that we just do ourselves, or what kind of funding might be available. So I'd love to talk with, Marcy and Stephen or anyone who's got experience with affordable housing, and because we're totally motivated to make that happen in the next 3 years on the Orcasong farmland.
Yeah, we had heard about that when we went on the farm tour last year.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like you were acquiring some more property where this could actually be happening.
Yes.
And this
so
is
if anybody has contacts, let me know.
Yeah, and
thank you for this forum.
You're welcome. One thing, the Guild also has the ability to have a little influence, especially with Cindy's help, with county government issues. A lot of the things that makers want to do, we run up against zoning problems. So by having the Guild as a force of people who come forwards to the government, not as a single property owner, to say, here's the benefits of changing XYZ. There can be the human benefits and the economic benefits and hopefully good environmental benefits too. So I see more strength even in this meeting, right? Rather than sitting home thinking these ideas by ourselves, but realizing we could get community force behind us it's inspiring.
I feel compelled to mention that we are also recipients of another grant to conduct countywide assessment for the need for farm worker and farmer housing. So given a couple of comments just now, I thought I should mention that good news as well.
Yeah, and the organization that grant was actually written by, we all collaborated together on putting in what our needs were, is that Northwest Ag Business Center in Mount Vernon. And they are identified by the USDA as a support group for co-ops. That's kind of where their passion is. And they have several really, inspired people who really are trying to help with that. And they are how the Food Hub got formed, was using that group's expertise. So we do have that resource available to us now, but I'm very interested in this lift economy. Is it LIFT?
Yes, lift economy.
Yeah.
I'll send you a bunch of information.
Yeah,
and one more thing, I wanted to throw out this idea that probably many of us have had before. It relates to the food and waste issue that we have. I'm on Orcas now, and I really think it would be amazing for us to have some kind of cooperative food waste reclamation and a center to do community composting. And maybe this is something that the food system group is looking at, but I feel like it's a huge opportunity to educate our residents and to just, you know, take the food out of the waste stream and put it back into the ground, and have something that we can collaborate on and feel really good about sequestering carbon. And there's a whole bunch of layers that would really, that concept would address. So I'm hoping that these groups can take that on, or I'm happy to be a part of a group that wants to take that on and support a business that wants to take that on.
I've done a little research about how you handle all the effluent and all once you get into a larger scale, and there's serious engineering involved. So we need some help with that.
I'm fascinated by the potential here for using shipping containers as housing. I mean, it works very tightly with the makers movement, and the EDC now funds these groups to teach people basic plumbing skills and electrical skills. And I was involved in one of them. I can see how, you know, there might be a grant opportunity to do a demo project on a shipping container and have those classes that do a plumbing, actually outfit that shipping container under the watchful eye of the plumber that you all get to do the course, and the electrical people also. I mean, I think there's an interesting opportunity here to work with housing, what we're already doing in training local tradespeople, and so, you know, there's a critical housing need here, and I think that might help.
Robert, I should interject because that's actually one of the programs I'm running that we're trying to run since we got sort of stopped for a few months because of the pandemic. So, and the makerspace efforts are also related to that because of how we see that the makerspace could provide training opportunities for people. Not just in manufacturing skills, but also facilities like we've always used the STEM Center at the high school and the other high school facilities for those classes primarily. So those are some great ideas. So if I'm happy to talk to you more about it, give me a call.
Thank you.
We're just sort of starting to work on sort of our next in-person, figuring out how we're going to do our next in-person classes and try to figure out like what we can actually do safely under the current conditions, and figure out what kind of model we'll be using for that. So would love to talk to you more about that.
Great.
So one of our agendas for hosting today was to try and get a sense of things you all wanted to know more about that could help your business or help the local makers economy. I'm not sure I got all of what I'd hoped to get with regard to that, but I do feel like I've gotten a lot from listening to each of you and appreciating the collective that's here in this small circle. So I'm really grateful.
Cindy?
One of the things that we talked about in our breakout room was that a nice next step might be to bring in somebody who knows about insurance to talk about, with collective maker spaces popping up, how we can either do collective insurance buy, or possibly if there's government agencies that could help provide insurance to different maker spaces?
Well, if the makerspace is a nonprofit, we could try and bring in somebody who's a nonprofit insurance person, handle the liability piece and theft and damages. But is that kind of the angle you're thinking of, is protecting the facility itself or more the individuals?
Well, maybe talking about both. I mean, the things that were being explored, we had one gentleman who was going to open a commercial kitchen, commissary kitchen in Olga. And he, as I understand it, he owns the space. But the question is then, with people coming in to use the space or to rent the space by the hour to make commercial products, how could it be made affordable for him to have insurance, or for the people coming in to have insurance in case anything were to happen, like fire or injury or anything like that? So there's that piece, and then there's the nonprofits like Alchemy, and how do they get their insurance?
Great. So I saw a nice little idea pop up there about eventually having our own insurance co-op. That would be pretty cool. I'm wondering if there are any other co-op ideas that have come up in your life. Things like, one for me is, it would be great if our fuel, when we are still petroleum based, is there some way we could have a fuel co-op? So that's one possibility. Does anybody have any other ideas on possible co-ops?
Or co-op, potentially co-op purchases, maybe not a specific co-op, but.
We also talked about maybe some cooperative facilities even on a regional scale, because one of the people in our group is in fiber arts, and we were talking about raising fiber animals and the problem with getting fleeces processed in the islands, or even anywhere on this side of the United States. And I know it had been kicked around to have a commercial fleece processing facility, but they're stinky and they require a lot of water, so they wouldn't necessarily make a lot of sense out here. But maybe if we could partner with Skagit in some way, through, and maybe the ports could help with that, with a little bit of funding, since that would be a commercial
fiber shed
stimulus
movement going on in Northern California about learning how to really create your own clothing and your own fibers locally, as well as production. And I was contacted by someone who's a weaver on Orcas, and did a little research and found that there is on Whidbey someone who has equipment to be able to turn the fleece into yarn much more efficiently. So maybe that would be a person also to talk to kind of look at this more on a regional scale. So that's a good one. I'm making notes. Thank you.
Marcy, I got to attend the TILF Alliance conference. I think it was just the beginning of this week. And one of their keynotes was a guy named Chris Newman. And he's from Sylvan Aqua Farms. And he presented on this idea of a community food system trust that is like an umbrella for worker-owned co-ops and different collectives of all these different sectors in the food system. And so he is, he's Afro-Indigenous, and he's advocating for really intensive use of agricultural land, and then in like huge swaths of land, having the decision-making be with Indigenous people. And that's his take on the land back movement. So yeah, that's just something, his talk was amazing. I'll send you the link when the recording is available. But his farm and what they're working on is like pretty groundbreaking. And they're like, it's looking at the whole food system, like you're saying, as an organism, and then how does that fit into the wider like economy and culture.
Yeah, one of the agricultural communities we were so fascinated to just be watching online, and then in February, right before COVID, we're able to visit, is called Agritopia. and it is in Gilbert, Arizona. And they have taken an old family farm and created a whole makerspace environment kind of at the heart of it. They still have a community farm that goes on, as well as food plots, you know, pea patch garden type things. Several restaurants have gotten developed there, and then they've taken a big part and created not so affordable housing, but housing, and also assisted living. They have a whole integrated thing. So they've got the elementary school, they've got the families living on the farm, old farmland, as well as assisted living. So they have a pretty amazing continuum there inside their community. And then the makerspace is an old Quonset hut that's been divvied into different little retail spaces, as well as some maker spaces. And, you know, there's a winery and a brewery. There's a lot of things going on in that piece of land. And we actually have dreamed of such a thing on Orcas as a way to create an experiential learning environment for people who may just come, they want dinner, but then they get exposed to lots of other things, or they come because they're ordering flowers for their wedding and they get exposed to maybe a caterer or something like that. And I know there's several other, you know, ways that we could pull this off, but I think the idea of trying to find more effective uses of agricultural land that actually support a community through its entire life cycle and still is growing food, but then integrates that human food relationship more sort of organically, if I can say, into the lifestyle experience. So I feel that the will for this type of change does exist here. And are up against some challenging financial, because cost of property and all, as well as cost of construction here is just outrageous. And also the zoning issues. So I think as a group, if we continue to have these conversations and we get to the point where we can divide into smaller committees and actually target some of these topics, and it could be, you know, could be housing, could be the food, could be the tool library. But I really would like to see us in next year move to action. You know, the first step is to figure out what it is that our needs are, and then marshal the resources, the human, to focus on how can we best accomplish those things. So we're very much about actually making change happen. I think we're old enough to have sat in enough meetings that are just great ideas that don't go anywhere. So I think you can count on us to want to really inspire change to happen. And that'll be, I think, where we head with moving from asset mapping to needs assessment to this idea of the market studies, is to really look at what's the mechanism that we need to make change happen. So I really want to thank you again all for attending. These types of programs are hosted roughly once a month with the EDC. And as we ourselves get more familiar with Zoom, as we are working on developing that skill, I think the Makers Guild itself could also, you know, host some, you know, more specific, narrower topics to go further. And I want to thank Mickey for inviting us, and it's exciting to have such a great turnout. It's really good today. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. And thank you both, Marcy and Stephen, so much for coming and talking to us. And like I said, next up, Sam Garson is going to be talking about what they've been working on at the STEM Center in December. And Nikita Palmasani was going to be talking to us in January about how, specifically focusing on the closing the waste stream. But then we will be sort of continuing these discussions long term, so that people get a chance to make those connections, so that they can move into action more quickly and find out who's got what going, and who can be good collaborators.